Meanwhile, in the frozen trenches of Belgium, during the quiet hours before Christmas, you're falling asleep to the story of men who briefly put down their rifles. Welcome to another slow, detailed story from the extraordinary made ordinary. Tonight, a December night in 1914 along the Western Front, where ordinary men found themselves in extraordinary circumstances, and where the simple act of survival became an act of quiet defiance against the machinery of war. A cold winter evening of frost-covered parapets, distant artillery rumbling, and the smell of damp earth mixed with wood smoke. An evening where the work is simple, steady, and necessary. Tonight is quieter than usual, but not for the reason you'd think. Standing watch in the cold, maintaining weapons in the darkness, preparing meagre meals over makeshift fires, and watching the stars appear above no man's land. Nothing dramatic, just the calm, careful rhythm of men trying to stay warm through a December night, 5 months into a war they thought would be over by now. So take a breath, let your shoulders drop, and allow the quiet patterns of the trenches to support you, however that looks for you tonight. It's the evening of December 24th, 1914. The temperature is dropping as darkness settles over the Belgian countryside. The trenches stretch ahead through the gathering night, their muddy walls lined with sandbags and timber supports, the frost beginning to sparkle on the duckboards underfoot. The sun has been gone for nearly an hour now. You watched it set earlier. The slow descent toward the western horizon, the light changing from yellow to orange to deep red. The clouds catching fire briefly, then fading, then gone. The sun has been gone for nearly an hour now. The light faded slowly, reluctantly, passing through shades of grey and blue before settling into the deep indigo that means full darkness is only minutes away. Each stage of twilight brought its own quality of light, its own mood, its own particular way of rendering the landscape visible, yet mysterious. The air has that particular quality that December brings, dry and sharp, the kind of cold that makes your nose hurt when you breathe in, that makes your lungs ache slightly, that reminds you with every breath that winter has settled in completely, that spring is months away, that this cold will be your companion for the foreseeable future. The December cold settles into the trench with the kind of thoroughness that makes you forget what warmth feels like, makes the concept of summer seem like something invented, impossible, a dream from another life entirely. You stand at your post, one of dozens of men spread along this particular section of the British line. Somewhere in Flanders. The exact location matters less than the simple fact of being here, in this moment, in this particular stretch of earth that has been dug and reinforced and lived in for the past several months. The trench has become a kind of home, in the way that places become home when you have no choice, when leaving isn't an option, when day follows day in the same narrow channel of existence. Home as defined by familiarity rather than comfort. Home as the place where you sleep, where you eat, where you exist for hours and days that blur together into the larger span of weeks, of months, of this particular winter that seems to have no end. The details exist whether you track them or not. The frost continues forming. The darkness continues gathering. Events proceed at their own pace. Your rifle rests against the fire step beside you. The Lee Enfield, standard British Army issue. Mark the 3rd, 10 rounds in the magazine. 1 in the chamber, if you're expecting trouble. None in the chamber now, because it's just watch. Just standing. Just presence. The rifle weighs 9.5 pounds. You know this not from being told, but from carrying it. From the weight becoming familiar. From the way it pulls on your shoulder when slung. From the balance of it in your hands. Standard issue. Its metal is cold enough now to stick to skin if you're careless. Cold enough to burn with that particular ice burn that feels like heat at first. That confuses the nerves into thinking something is on fire when really it's just the opposite. Just the slow extraction of all warmth, all energy, all life heat being drawn away into the unforgiving metal that's been sitting in this December air since afternoon, since the temperature started its descent toward whatever low point tonight will bring. The rifle has become familiar, not comfortable exactly, but known. The weight of it, the balance, the way the bolt moves when you work it, smooth and mechanical, requiring just the right amount of pressure, just the right angle, the slight catch at the end of its travel that tells you it's seated properly. The click of metal on metal that means ready. That means live. These details have sunk into muscle memory, into the automatic responses that require no conscious thought. Your feet know where to step on the duckboards without looking, avoiding the places where the wood has started to rot, where water pools in the spaces between planks, where yesterday someone slipped and twisted an ankle, had to be helped back to the dugout by two others who could barely walk themselves, all three of them shuffling like old men, though none had seen 30 years, moving slowly through the trench, supporting each other, the injured man trying not to cry out, trying to maintain some dignity even in pain. The trench walls rise on either side, sandbags stacked and layered. The walls stand steady, creating barriers meant to stop bullets, meant to absorb shrapnel, meant to provide some minimal protection. Some bags are bulging with the weight of earth behind them, the pressure of soil that wants to collapse back into the space that's been carved out of it. Other bags are beginning to sag, their fabric weakened where the rain has gotten in, where moisture has penetrated, where time and weather have done their slow work of erosion. Timber supports brace the walls at regular intervals, rough-cut posts driven into the mud with sledgehammers during the early days, when energy was still available for such things, when men had the strength to swing heavy tools, when the line was being established and everything was urgent. Horizontal beams wedge between the vertical posts, creating a kind of skeleton, a framework that holds back the soil, that resists the slow collapse that gravity demands. That keeps the trench from becoming just another hole in the ground. Someone carved initials into one of the posts near your position. You noticed them weeks ago, but have never thought to ask who made them, never thought to wonder about the person who took the time, who used a knife or bayonet to scratch letters into the wood. The initials are barely legible, even in daylight, just marks in wood. A small assertion of identity in a place that tries to erase individuality. That treats men as interchangeable parts in a machine, the work of a quiet afternoon perhaps, when the artillery was silent and there was nothing to do but stand and wait. Wait for orders that might never come, wait for something to happen that might never happen, wait for time to pass in its peculiar trench fashion, where minutes can stretch to hours when you're cold and bored and vigilant, where hours can vanish in what feels like moments when you're asleep or occupied with tasks, where the normal measurement of time breaks down and gets replaced by something else. The day has been quiet, unusually so, the kind of quiet that makes you notice its absence when it's finally broken. No artillery, no sniping, no patrols, just the general background hum of two armies existing in proximity, existing in a state of suspended conflict, waiting, always waiting, above the parapet, above the sandbags and wire and all the earthbound concerns. The sky holds onto the last traces of twilight, the last remnants of daylight clinging to the western horizon, refusing to give way completely, creating that in-between time, not quite day, not quite night, the liminal space where both exist simultaneously. A deep blue now, almost purple in its intensity, fading gradually to black at the eastern horizon where night has already fully settled. The stars are beginning to appear, one by one, clear and sharp, each one emerging as the sky darkens. The winter air holds them, sharp enough to seem close, though incomprehensibly distant. They emerge slowly, gradually, as if being turned on individually by some unseen hand. First the brightest ones, the ones that can compete with the last remnants of daylight. Sirius and Vega, and the others whose names you might have learned once but can't remember now. The process is gradual, imperceptible in the moment. You can't catch a star actually appearing. Can't see the exact instant it becomes visible. But looking away and looking back reveals more, always more, the sky filling, the darkness revealing itself to be not empty, but crowded, full of distant suns, each one impossibly far, each one burning with its own light. Then the dimmer ones appear, filling in the spaces between the bright ones, creating layers, depth, the sense that the sky goes on forever, that above you stretches infinity, creating the familiar patterns. Constellations that have been there for as long as humans have looked up, longer. Patterns that existed before cities, before empires, before words had been invented to name them. The constellations emerge in their appointed places, following patterns older than nations, older than wars, older than the concepts that bring men to places like this. Orion rises in the east, its belt unmistakable even to someone like you who knows nothing about astronomy. 3 stars in a perfect line, flanked by others that form the hunter's shoulders and legs, wielding a club and shield against some invisible enemy. The Pleiades cluster appears, a small group of stars that look like they're huddled together for warmth, though they are actually separated by vast distances, only appearing close from this particular vantage point. From this small blue planet, from this muddy trench, no clouds tonight. That's both good and bad, in the way that most things here are both good and bad. Good because it means no rain, and rain in December is worse than almost anything except shelling. Rain that soaks through wool no matter how tightly it's woven. Rain that turns the trench floor from merely muddy to actual soup, ankle deep, knee deep in places, rain that fills boots and seeps into blankets and makes everything heavy. But no clouds also means the cold will deepen as the hours pass. The heat from the day, what little there was, will radiate out into space, into the vast cold sink of the winter atmosphere. Nothing to trap it, nothing to hold it close to the ground. Frost will form on every surface, starting with the metal things, the rifles and wire and corrugated iron, then spreading to the wood, the posts and duckboards, and the handles of tools, eventually coating even the sandbags, even the earth itself, where it's exposed. Ice will grow in the puddles that dot the trench floor. Thin ice at first, a skin that breaks when you step on it, but thickening as the temperature drops, until by morning it might be solid enough to support weight, to walk on without breaking through. Breath will turn to vapour, visible in the air, each exhalation creating a small cloud that hangs for a moment before slowly dispersing, revealing with each breath that yes, you're still here, still breathing, still occupying this particular point in space and time. You adjust your wool coat, pulling it tighter around your shoulders. The motion is automatic, performed without conscious thought, one of hundreds of small adjustments made throughout each day, constant attempts to manage discomfort, to maintain some minimum level of warmth. The fabric is rough, coarse wool that's scratchy against the collar of your shirt, against your neck where skin is exposed, but it holds in what warmth your body can generate. Not much warmth, but something. Some small barrier between you and the cold, enough to keep hypothermia at bay as long as you keep moving, as long as you keep the blood circulating, as long as you maintain some spark of metabolic fire burning in the core, in the vital organs that need to stay warm to keep functioning. The coat is heavy, adds its weight to everything else you're carrying, the equipment that's become like a second skin, webbing crisscrossing your chest, canvas straps holding pouches, ammunition in the left pouches, emergency rations in the right, water bottle on your hip, gas mask in its bag across your chest, bayonet at your side, all of it distributed, all of it balanced, all of it weighing you down in ways you no longer consciously notice. The equipment that's become like a second skin, webbing and ammunition pouches, water bottle, gas mask in its canvas bag, all of it weighing you down, all of it necessary. Your hands rest inside worn gloves. The leather is thin at the fingertips, the wool lining compressed from months of use. You flex your fingers, making fists and releasing them. The motion automatic, familiar. The cold is there, observing you as you observe it, neither winning, neither yielding, just existing together in this December night. The process is mechanical. Open and close, a rhythm that matches your breathing, that matches the slow passage of time. That gives you something to do besides just stand and wait. Your feet are already starting to lose feeling. The boots are good boots, army issue, better than what you had before the war, but they're not designed for standing still in December. They're designed for marching, for movement, for generating heat through activity. Standing watch doesn't generate heat. Standing watch just exposes you to the cold, gives it time to work its way through the leather, through the wool socks, through whatever newspaper you've stuffed in for extra insulation, through everything. Down the trench, perhaps 30 yards to your left, you can see the faint glow of a brazier, one of several along this section. Small portable stoves, charcoal burning in metal containers, providing heat, providing light, providing a focus point for men who need something to gather around, something to warm hands by, something that represents comfort, however minimal. The braziers are precious, fuel is rationed, the charcoal carefully measured, each brazier lit at appointed times, extinguished at appointed times. The warmth they provide, small but significant, the difference between bearable and unbearable cold, the difference between functioning and merely surviving. The light is carefully shielded, so no light spills above the parapet where German observers might see it. But from your angle, you can see the orange glow reflected off the faces of men gathered around it. 3 or 4 silhouettes dark against the faint light, standing close to the coals, holding their hands out toward the warmth, rotating slowly so that all sides get some benefit, some brief reprieve from the cold. The smell of burning charcoal drifts this way occasionally when the wind shifts, mixed with tobacco smoke and the ever-present scent of damp earth. Someone is making tea. You can smell that too. The bitter smell of tea leaves steeping in water boiled over the brazier. The preparation of tea is an art here, limited by circumstances, but performed with care nonetheless. Water from canteens, tea leaves measured carefully, the tin balanced on coals, the weight while water heats, the exact moment to add the leaves, the time allowed for steeping. All of it matters, all of it part of the ritual, the eternal British solution to any situation. Cold, make tea. Tired, make tea. Scared, make tea. The preparation of it, as much ceremony as practical act. A way of marking time, of creating structure in days that otherwise blur together. To your right, the trench extends into darkness, curving slightly so you can't see more than 50 feet before it disappears around the bend. The design is intentional. If a shell lands in the trench, the curve limits the blast effect, prevents shrapnel from travelling straight down the line. If enemy soldiers make it into the trench somehow, they can't fire straight down the length of it, can't create a shooting gallery, have to advance around each curve, exposing themselves, making each section defensible. Every aspect of the trench reflects lessons learned through experience, through trial and error, through the grim mathematics of survival, the depth calculated to provide protection from rifle fire, the width determined by the need for movement, the drainage considered, the firing steps positioned, practical considerations made physical in mud and sandbags, in timber, bracing, and corrugated iron roofing, in the endless small details that mean the difference between a functional defensive position and a death trap, in timber and corrugated iron, in the careful geometry of survival. Someone designed these trenches, thought through the angles, calculated the curves, determined the optimal depth and width, probably an engineer back in Britain who who'd never set foot in Flanders, who worked from principles and calculations, who translated theory into specifications, who sent those specifications forward to be implemented by men with shovels. Beyond the parapet, beyond the sandbags, and the carefully maintained defensive position, no man's land stretches invisible in the gathering darkness. 300 yards that might as well be 3,000. 300 yards that separate you from the German positions, from the men in field grey who occupy trenches mirror to your own. No man's land stretches invisible in the gathering darkness. 300 yards of ground, perhaps 400 in some places, less in others, shell craters and wire, abandoned equipment and things you don't think about when you can help it. 300 yards, not far. A good walker could cover that distance in minutes on flat ground. A runner in less, but that ground isn't flat anymore. And crossing it is impossible when men on both sides have rifles trained on every yard of it. During the day, you can see the German trenches clearly enough. The dark line of their parapet, the occasional movement that might be a head raised to look, smoke from their fires, all the same signs of occupation that your own trench shows. But now, in the darkness, there's only the knowledge that they're there. You can't see them, can't see anything beyond the wire, just darkness, and the stars above, and the certainty that somewhere out there, someone else is standing watch. Looking this way, seeing the same darkness, feeling the same cold, thinking thoughts that might not be so different from your own, wondering about Christmas Eve, about home, about when this will end. The silence is not absolute, it never is. There's always something. Background noise that you stop hearing after a while. That becomes part of the baseline, part of the texture of trench existence. There's the distant rumble of artillery. Miles away, someone else's sector, someone else's war happening simultaneously with yours. The sound carries strangely at night, sometimes seeming closer than it is, sometimes fading to almost nothing. The occasional crack of a rifle, someone taking a shot at movement or shadow. The loud report, sharp and immediate, followed by the fading echo. Then silence again. Deeper than before, more noticeable in contrast. The silence after sound always feels heavier, closer, the small sounds of the trench itself. The scrape of a boot on duckboard, someone shifting position, adjusting equipment, the clink of metal on metal as someone checks their rifle, making sure everything is in order, making sure they're ready. Low voices from the group around the brazier, too distant to make out words but close enough to hear the rhythm of conversation, the rise and fall of human speech, the comfort of not being entirely alone even when you're standing alone. Someone coughs, the sound harsh in the cold air, echoing slightly off the trench walls. Then again, a longer bout, wet and rattling. The winter cough that half the men have, that lingers for weeks. That's probably bronchitis or worse, but there's nothing to be done except wait, hope the body fights it off, hope it doesn't develop into pneumonia, hope it doesn't weaken you enough to make other things worse. The medical attention available here is basic at best. Your watch will last another hour, perhaps two. Time moves the way it always does here. By watches, not clocks. The rhythm's so familiar now that different rhythms seem impossible to imagine. You know roughly what time it is now, by the position of the stars, by the depth of the cold, by familiar patterns learned through repetition. Evening watch, the first watch after full dark. Not yet midnight watch, which is colder, darker, longer. Not yet pre-dawn, when exhaustion weighs heavier than equipment. When staying awake requires real effort, when the mind plays tricks, creates shadows that aren't there, hears sounds that don't exist. When the boundary between waking and dreaming becomes uncertain. Evening watch is bearable. The cold hasn't yet penetrated fully. There's still some residual warmth from the day, from the brief hour when the sun was high enough to provide some heat, when standing in direct light felt like a gift, like a blessing. But that's gone now. Any accumulated warmth has radiated away into the atmosphere, into space. What remains is just the cold and the darkness and the slow passage of minutes toward the time when your relief will arrive. When you can step down from the fire step, make your way to the dugout, descend into that marginally warmer space, wrap yourself in blankets, and let exhaustion pull you down into sleep, into whatever dreams or darkness awaits there. But that's hours away yet. For now, there's this moment, just this one moment, and then the next, and then the one after that. The cold settling in, the stars emerging, the familiar weight of the rifle, the knowledge that dozens of men share this space, this routine, this particular way of being. You stamp your feet, trying to generate warmth. The motion is automatic, something you do every few minutes without thinking about it. Movement means life. Movement means circulation. Movement means postponing the numbing that will eventually come regardless. The sound of boots on duckboards echoes slightly in the trench. Each stomp sends a small vibration through the wooden walkway. These boards are all that separate you from the mud below, the cold slurry that's always waiting, always ready to suck at boots and soak through leather. You're careful not to step off the boards. That lesson was learned early. The mud is always there, waiting in the gaps, pooling in the low spots, seeping up through cracks, ankle deep in some places, knee deep in others. In the really bad sections it can be waist deep, can trap a man, can require help to get free. There are stories of men who stepped wrong, who went in too deep, who couldn't get out before hypothermia set in. Whether those stories are true, or just trench legend, you don't know. Someone is approaching from your left. You hear them before you see them. The distinctive rhythm of boots on boards. Not hurried, not alarmed. Just the steady pace of someone making rounds, checking on the men, maintaining order. You know who it is before they're close enough to see clearly. Corporal Matthews, he makes this circuit every hour, has been doing it for months, longer than you've been here. There's a steadiness to him that's reassuring. Nothing seems to fluster him, not the cold, not the shelling, not the occasional chaos when things go wrong. He just continues, methodical, reliable, present, one of those men who makes everyone else calmer just by being calm himself. He approaches from the left, his footsteps recognizable, the rhythm familiar, heavier than some men, more deliberate, the gait of someone who knows exactly where he's going, who has walked this section hundreds of times, who could navigate it blindfolded. He stops beside you, doesn't speak immediately, just shares the space, the cold, the watch, the moment. His presence comfortable, expected, part of the routine, just stands and looks out over the parapet for a moment, sharing the view, sharing the cold, sharing the watch, a moment of companionship that requires no words. That's more about presence than communication. You can hear his breathing, steady and even. You can smell tobacco on him. He must have been smoking earlier. The scent clings to the wool of his coat, mixed with all the other smells, sweat and earth and cordite residue. "Quiet tonight," he says finally. His voice is low, conversational, not really a question, just an observation, an opening if you want to respond, permission to stay silent if you don't. You nod, though the gesture is lost in the darkness. Been quiet all day, near enough. Your own voice sounds strange to you. You haven't spoken in hours. The words feel rusty, unpracticed. Christmas Eve, Matthews observes. Maybe they're feeling festive. There's something in his tone, not quite humour, not quite irony, just acknowledgement of the strangeness, the peculiarity of celebrating Christmas in a place like this. There's a pause, both of you considering this. The idea of Christmas in the trenches feels strange. Christmas is home, and warmth and family, decorations and food and rituals, familiar patterns repeated year after year. But Christmas exists here too, in whatever form it can take. extra rations distributed earlier, rum in the tea more than usual, letters from home saved to be read again tonight. Small connections to a world that still exists somewhere, somehow, despite everything. Keep alert, Matthews says. 2 more hours, then Davidson takes over. The instruction is unnecessary. You know the routine. But Matthews says it anyway. Because that's his job, because someone has to maintain the forms. Because structure matters even when everyone knows the structure. He moves on down the line. His footsteps fade gradually. You're alone again, with the cold and the darkness and the careful attention that standing watch requires. Not focused exactly, not straining, just aware, present in the moment while part of your mind wanders. Thoughts drift like the fog of your breath, memory and imagination mixing with present perception until boundaries blur, until past and present and future become less distinct. The frost is definitely forming now. Frost catches what little light there is. Tiny crystals growing on the sandbags, on the rim of the parapet, on the metal parts of your rifle. Beautiful in its way, if you let yourself think about it. Each crystal is unique, they say. No two exactly alike. The ice forms in patterns determined by temperature and humidity and molecular structure. Each crystal growing according to rules that are both strict and flexible, creating infinite variation within fixed parameters. Somewhere in no man's land, a flare goes up. Not close, perhaps a mile away, but the light reaches this far. A brief cold illumination, harsh and artificial. Colours drain away, replaced by stark contrasts of light and shadow. The wire becomes visible, strands stretching into the distance, tangled and purposeful. Shell craters stand out as darker patches, wounds in the earth. For a moment you can see the German parapet clearly, the sandbags and timber, the same construction creating the same results on both sides. Then the flare dies, falling back to earth. The darkness returns, deeper for having been interrupted. Your eyes adjust again slowly. The stars reassert themselves. The faint glow from the brazier becomes visible once more. The world returns to its previous state. Communication with home feels increasingly strange, the disconnect growing with each passing month. The letters arriving with news that's already weeks old, news from a world that continues without you, that changes in your absence, that becomes less familiar with each report. You think about the letter you received 3 days ago. It arrived with the mail delivery. Your name called out, the small surge of anticipation, the envelope handed over, your mother's handwriting on the outside, the familiar script, the careful formation of each letter. The way she writes your name, it's carefully folded in your pocket now, the paper soft from repeated reading. Your mother's handwriting, familiar and comforting, even though the words bring news from a world that feels increasingly remote. News from home, already weeks old by the time it reached you. Your sister is engaged. Your father's health is improved. The weather has been cold, small details that make up a life continuing somewhere else. A life parallel to this one, but separate from it. Both lives are real. Both are yours, but they exist in different spaces. Operating according to different rules, different rhythms, different concerns. There in England, life continues in familiar patterns. Work and rest, meals and conversations, the slow progression of days and weeks. Here in this trench, life is different, compressed, intense, focused on basics, survival and duty, warmth and food, the management of fear and boredom, the slow passage of hours measured in watch rotations and meal intervals. Home feels both very close and impossibly distant. Close because you can picture it clearly, can see the house, can imagine the rooms, can almost smell the familiar scents. Distant because all of that exists in another world, another reality, separated from this trench by more than miles, by the gulf between peace and war, between normal life and this. You wonder what they're doing tonight. Christmas Eve at home. The preparations would be in full motion, the house busy with activity, familiar patterns repeated, traditions observed. Preparations would be underway, the goose ordered weeks ago, vegetables prepared, the small tree in the parlour decorated with ornaments that have been used for as long as you can remember. Your mother would be making mince pies. The smell would fill the house, that distinctive Christmas smell of spices and fruit and pastry. Your father would be reading by the fire. Your sister and her new fiancé would be there, helping, laughing, living a life that continues without you in it. The thought isn't painful exactly. You've learned to manage homesickness. It's more wistful than painful. A gentle longing mixed with acceptance. This is where you are. This is what's real right now. That other life still exists, will still be there when you return. If you return. But you don't think about that. Can't think about that and still function. So you think about the certainty of return, the inevitability of it. The war will end. You'll go home, life will resume, even though deep down you know nothing will be quite the same. The cold intensifies. Your feet are numb now, despite the stamping. The cold has penetrated through all the layers, reached skin, begun the slow process of stealing sensation. Your toes are individual points of cold, distinct and separate, each one announcing its discomfort. Your fingers have lost most of their feeling. You flex them inside your gloves, trying to assess the numbness, trying to determine if it's just cold or if it's becoming something worse. Frostbite is a real concern. Men lose fingers, lose toes, lose feet in extreme cases. The cold affects different parts of your body in different ways. Your face feels tight, the skin pulled taut, the muscles underneath resistant to movement. Smiling would hurt if there were reason to smile. Talking requires extra effort. The facial muscles sluggish, uncooperative. The cold distorts time. Minutes stretch when you're cold, expand beyond their usual bounds, making each watch feel longer than it should, making relief feel further away than the clock suggests. Cheeks and nose reddened by exposure. You can feel the tightness of the skin, the way it doesn't want to move properly. Your ears ache under your cap. The pain a dull throb that's become so constant you barely notice it except when you move your head. This is normal. This is every night. This is every watch. Every hour spent standing in the open when winter has settled in. You've learned to accept it, to not fight it, to just let the cold be what it is. Resistance only makes it worse. You blow on your hands, cupping them together, breathing into the space between your palms. The warm air trapped briefly before escaping. It helps for a moment. A few seconds of slightly less cold. Before December air reasserts itself. From the German lines comes sound. Faint at first, uncertain whether it's wind or voices, but it continues. Grows slightly clearer. Resolves into singing. Men's voices carrying across no man's land. Carrying across the 300 yards of frozen ground. Carrying through the still night air. Many voices, dozens perhaps, all singing together. The sound reaching you in waves, rising and falling. You strain to hear it. The words are indistinct at this distance, the German language unfamiliar, but the tune is recognizable. Something about silent night, holy night, a carol. The Germans are singing Christmas carols, singing to themselves, or singing to you, or just singing because it's Christmas Eve and that's what you do. Something shifts, unnamed, present, not quite surprised because you knew, abstractly, that Germans celebrate Christmas, but the concrete reality of it is different. The actual sound of their voices, singing the same songs you grew up singing, creating the same seasonal rituals, the recognition that the men over there are human in exactly the same way you're human. They have homes, families, memories of Christmases past, hopes for Christmases future. They're cold right now, just like you're cold. Standing watch, just like you're standing watch. You're not the only one who hears it. Down at the brazier, the conversation has stopped. Men are listening, standing still, trying to make sense of this. Someone near you makes a comment you can't quite hear. Someone else laughs, nervous, uncertain. The singing continues, more voices joining in, the sound swelling. Dozens of them, maybe more, all singing together. The harmony is good, the rhythm steady. These aren't professional singers, but they're practiced. They know the song. They've sung it before, probably every Christmas of their lives. The singing carries clearly in the still air, sound travelling without interference, without wind to disperse it, without rain to muffle it, just voices and cold air and the acoustics of the trenches creating natural amplification. You can hear individual voices sometimes, tenor and bass, the harmony shifting, the melody passing from one section to another, the song structured, practiced, sung many times before, familiar to everyone participating. It's beautiful in its way, this music floating across the frozen ground, across the space that usually knows only violence, only threat, only the sounds of warfare. Now holding something else, something that contradicts everything this place represents. Human voices asserting themselves against the machinery of war, against the cold and darkness, against all the forces that want to reduce men to numbers, to targets, to enemies. Just men singing because it's Christmas Eve, and that's what you do on Christmas Eve, because the songs connect them to home, to family, to something beyond this trench, beyond this war, beyond this moment. The song ends. There's a moment of silence, deeper than before, weighted with meaning, everyone on both sides waiting, listening, wondering what happens next, whether this is the end of it or the beginning of something. There's a moment of consideration, a pause where everyone waits, listening, wondering, processing what just happened, what it means, whether response is appropriate, whether response is allowed. Then from somewhere down your own line, a voice starts up. English this time, British, one of your own. The same carol, same melody, different words, silent night, holy night. One voice becomes two, becomes five, becomes a dozen. You find yourself joining in, the words familiar from childhood, from church services and family gatherings, from a time before the war when Christmas meant something simpler, something uncomplicated by trenches and wire and the knowledge of what men can do to each other. All is calm, all is bright. The irony isn't lost on you. Singing about peace in a place where peace is the furthest thing from daily reality, where violence is always possible, where death is always close, but the singing itself creates a moment of something like peace, a brief suspension of the normal state of affairs, a crack in the routine of enmity, something unexpected, something that shouldn't be possible, but is happening anyway. The carol ends, silence settles again, but different now, changed somehow, charged with possibility. No one quite knows what to do with this, what it means, whether it will lead somewhere or just fade away, whether it's significant or just a momentary aberration. The moment stretches, everyone still, everyone quiet, everyone processing what just happened. The singing from across no man's land, the response from your own trenches, the shared music, the brief connection across the divide. What does it mean? No one knows. What will come of it? No one can say. Will it matter? Impossible to tell. But something happened. Something real. Something that breaks the usual pattern. Something unprecedented. You wait, listening, wondering. The cold forgotten temporarily. The discomfort pushed aside. Your attention focused entirely on the German line, on listening for more music, for more signs, for whatever might happen next. Cold settles more completely. Stars shift westward. The trenches remain what they are. Lines of earth and sandbags stretching across Belgium, dividing men who speak different languages, who serve different nations. But something has shifted, subtle and uncertain. A crack in the routine, in the expected patterns, in the way things are supposed to work. Just singing, just Christmas carols, but somehow it feels like more than that. Footsteps approaching, the rhythm familiar. Matthew's returning, making another circuit, checking on this development, assessing the situation, trying to gauge what's happening, what it means, what he should do about it. He's been a corporal for 2 years, promoted for reliability, for steady performance, for the kind of leadership that doesn't require dramatics, just consistency, just presence, just the ability to keep men functioning under conditions that test everyone. Corporal Matthews is back, checking on this new development, moving slowly, taking his time, observing, listening, gathering information before making any decisions, before determining what response is appropriate, before choosing how to handle this unprecedented situation. He stops beside you again, both of you looking out toward the German lines, both trying to understand what just happened, what it might mean. Strange business, he says quietly, his voice neutral, not approving or disapproving, just observing, acknowledging the strangeness without trying to interpret it. Yes, Corporal, your response is automatic, the proper military acknowledgement, though the situation feels anything but military, feels human instead, personal, something that exists outside the structures of rank and duty. Orders are to maintain watch, Matthews continues. Stay alert, but no firing unless fired upon. The instruction contains multitudes. It doesn't explicitly permit anything, but it doesn't forbid anything either. It creates space, room for events to unfold. You nod, understanding the unspoken permission, the careful official non-stance that allows individual decisions without endorsing them. That maintains plausible deniability while opening possibilities. Matthews moves on. Continuing his rounds, your watch continues, the cold continues, the night continues, but the memory of the singing remains. A warm spot in the cold, something to think about as the hours pass. As you stand and wait for relief, the night deepens, more stars emerge. The Milky Way becomes visible, a band of light stretching across the sky, billions of stars too distant to distinguish individually, creating a luminous river across the darkness. The cold deepens too, frost grows thicker, your breath clouds more densely, each exhalation creating a small patch of fog, the temperature dropping degree by degree, approaching whatever minimum this particular night will reach, but you're still here, still standing, still keeping watch, the rifle beside you, the stars above you, the knowledge that morning will eventually come, that this watch will end, that everything eventually changes. Orion shifts westward, each star moving its appointed distance. Matthews makes another round. Your breath continues, in and out, the rhythm unchanged. Davidson arrives precisely on time. You hear him coming, recognize his gait, heavier than Matthews, less practiced. Davidson is newer, still learning the rhythms, still finding his place in the routine. The changing of the watch is mechanical in its precision. You brief him on the evening, the singing, the quiet, the standing orders. He listens, nods, takes up position. You retrieve your rifle, sling it over your shoulder, make your way toward the dugout. The duckboards creak under your feet, each board announcing your passage. Men are gathered in small groups along the trench, more than usual for this time of night. The singing has brought people out, created a watchfulness that's different from the military variety. Curiosity mixed with caution, hope mixed with skepticism. Men standing in the cold discussing what just happened, what it might mean, whether it will continue tomorrow, whether orders will come down to stop it. The brazier is still burning, surrounded now by a larger group. Someone has made fresh tea, the metal pot balanced on the coals, steam rising into the cold air. You join the group, accept a tin cup when it's offered. Wrap your numb hands around the warm metal. The heat seeps through the thin tin, almost painful against your frozen fingers. But welcome despite that. Sensation returns. Pins and needles, pins and needles. The uncomfortable process of warming, of blood flow resuming, of nerves waking up. The talk is quiet, speculative. Someone mentions hearing the Germans have been decorating their trenches, putting up small trees. Someone else says that's just rumour. No way to know for sure. Everything is rumour here. Information travels in fragments, gets distorted, gets embellished. My sister sent me a letter, says Private Miller. Young, barely 20. Says they're praying for peace. Whole congregation at the church, every Sunday. His voice carries hope. Faith that prayer might actually accomplish something. That divine intervention might end what men have started. There's a pause. Prayer feels almost quaint in this context, but no one says that. Miller is young, still connected to home in ways others have begun to let go of, still believing in things that war hasn't yet taken from him. Wouldn't mind a bit of peace tonight, someone says. Just tonight. One quiet Christmas. The sentiment is universal. One night without artillery, one night without threat, one night to remember what it felt like to be human beings instead of soldiers. Murmurs of agreement, heads nodding, men acknowledging shared desire. One night, that's all. Not asking for the war to end, not asking for miracles, just asking for one night of peace, Christmas, when peace is supposed to prevail. The tea is hot and bitter and perfect. You drink it slowly, letting it warm you from the inside, feeling sensation return to your core, to your extremities. The shivering that you hadn't fully noticed begins to subside. Your muscles relax slightly, the constant tension of cold easing. The conversation shifts. Someone tells a joke, not particularly funny, but everyone laughs anyway. The laughter is needed, is valuable, is part of what keeps men human, what maintains morale, what makes this bearable. Someone else starts a story about leave in London. The stories are familiar, variations on themes everyone knows. Women and pubs and freedom from military routine. Stories that probably aren't entirely true, embellished with each retelling. But they serve their purpose, passing time, creating connection, building bonds between men who've been thrown together by circumstance, who rely on each other for survival, who've become closer than brothers in some ways, united by shared experience that no one else can fully understand. The dugout beckons. Sleep is necessary, always in short supply, seized in whatever moments can be carved out, rationed like everything else. You finish your tea, hand back the cup, make your excuses. The group understands. Sleep when you can. That's the rule. The dugout is 10 yards down the trench, on the left. 10 yards that require careful steps, watching the duckboards, avoiding the gaps, keeping your balance on the uneven surface. The trench is not straight, it curves slightly, following the contours of the land, following the plan drawn by engineers who considered fields of fire, who calculated optimal angles, who reduced warfare to geometry. 10 yards down the trench, on the left, marked by a sheet of corrugated iron propped across the entrance. You duck through the low opening, leaving the cold behind, entering the relative warmth of underground. The dugout is not warm exactly. Cold air seeps in through gaps, through the canvas flap, through the earth itself. But it's warmer than outside, sheltered from the wind, insulated by soil, protected from the worst of the elements. A candle burns on a shelf carved into one wall, casting flickering shadows across the earthen ceiling, across the rough timber supports, across the faces of two men already asleep on narrow bunks, their breathing slow and steady, deep in whatever rest they can find. Your bunk is the third one, bottom level. You remove your boots. The process takes longer than it should. Your fingers still not fully responsive, still clumsy with cold. The leather is stiff, the lace is complicated, but eventually they come free. You slide your feet, still in thick socks, under the rough wool blankets. They smell of mildew and smoke and humanity. You don't undress further. No one does. The cold makes that impractical. And there's always the possibility of needing to move quickly. Always the chance that something might happen, that you might need to be up and equipped and ready. That's drummed into you. Always be ready. Always be prepared. Never be caught without your boots on. You lie back. The bunk is narrow, uncomfortable. The straw mattress thin and lumpy, but it's horizontal. It's rest. It's off your feet. After hours of standing watch, that's luxury enough. Sleep comes reluctantly. Your body is tired enough, exhausted, but your mind keeps returning to the singing, to the strangeness of hearing German voices carrying a tune you've known since childhood, to the possibility that this night might be different, that tomorrow might bring something unexpected. You think about Christmas mornings past, waking early, too excited to sleep, stockings hung by the fireplace, breakfast of bacon and eggs, church at 10, the building decorated with evergreen and candles, home again for dinner, the table crowded with family. Tomorrow will not be like that. Tomorrow will be tinned meat and hard biscuits, tea instead of wine, the trench instead of home. But maybe, if the singing means anything, maybe tomorrow will have its own kind of grace, its own particular gifts, the candle gutters, flame dancing in some unfelt draught. Shadows move across the earthen ceiling, hypnotic in their motion, random patterns that draw the eye, that quiet the mind, that ease the transition from waking to sleep. You watch them without really watching. Let your thoughts slow. Let your breathing deepen. Let the exhaustion take you, pull you down into darkness, into rest, into whatever dreams might come. The sounds from outside are muffled here, distant, filtered through earth and timber. The cold is bearable, manageable. The blankets trap your body heat. Create a small envelope of relative warmth, a cocoon against the winter. The boundary between waking and sleep blurs, thoughts becoming less coherent, images from the day mixing with memories, with imagination, with the peculiar half-dreams that come before true sleep. You see home, you see the trench, you see the German lines, all of it layered, overlapping, making a kind of sense that only works in this state. That will seem strange if examined in full wakefulness. Sleep, when it finally comes, is deep and dreamless. The kind of sleep that erases everything, that provides complete escape, that gives the body time to recover, the mind time to process, the spirit time to rest. The sleep of exhaustion, of bodies pushed to their limits, of minds that have learned to take rest wherever it can be found. Hours pass unmarked, time becomes meaningless. There's only the darkness, the stillness, the blessed absence of cold and duty. Outside, the night continues its slow progression. The stars wheel overhead, patient and indifferent. The frost deepens, coating everything in crystalline patterns, making the battlefield beautiful in its own terrible way. The night proceeds according to its own logic, its own timeline, independent of human wishes or needs. The temperature continues dropping. The frost continues thickening. The stars continue their rotation, all of it happening whether witnessed or not, whether attended to or ignored. The watches change throughout the night, men moving to and from their posts with quiet efficiency, the rotation maintained, the coverage constant, always someone watching, always someone alert, always someone keeping guard, the routine maintained through all circumstances, through cold and heat, through day and night, through peace and war, the eternal cycle of military existence. The Germans sing again, different carols this time. O Tannenbaum, Stille Nacht once more. The music floating across no man's land like an offering, like a question without an answer, like a hope too fragile to speak aloud. No shots are fired, no artillery disturbs the frozen peace. The war pauses, holding its breath, waiting to see what Christmas morning might bring, whether this strange quiet will hold, whether something impossible might actually happen. Nothing interrupts the night's pace, cold and clear and full of stars, full of possibility, full of questions that won't be answered until dawn, until men wake and make choices, until the day reveals what the night has begun, and you sleep through all of it, wrapped in rough wool, breathing slowly, dreaming of nothing, storing up rest for whatever tomorrow holds, for whatever impossible, improbable, unexpected gift Christmas Day might bring. The dugout holds you in its earthen embrace, the darkness complete now that the candle has burned out, complete and comfortable, the kind of darkness that feels protective rather than threatening. That invites sleep rather than resisting it. You can hear the breathing of the other men, slow and rhythmic, the breathing of sleep, of bodies taking rest, of minds shut down for the night, each breath a small sound in the darkness, each exhalation a reminder of life continuing, of men surviving another day, of tomorrow coming whether you're ready or not. The blankets have created a small microclimate, your body heat trapped beneath the wool, creating a pocket of relative warmth. Not comfortable exactly. Not what you'd call warm if you had real warmth to compare it to, but warmer than outside, warmer than the trench, warm enough. Outside the dugout, the night continues. The stars continue their rotation. The frost continues to grow. The cold continues to deepen. But here, in this space carved out of earth, there's shelter. There's protection. There's the possibility of rest. The singing from earlier feels like it happened days ago rather than hours. Time stretches and compresses in strange ways here. Moments can feel eternal. Hours can vanish. The normal flow of time disrupted by exhaustion, by cold, by the strange rhythms of military life. But the memory is clear. The German voices carrying Silent Night across no man's land. The British response, the moment of shared music, of shared humanity, of connection across the divide that's supposed to separate absolutely. What it means, you don't know. What will come of it, you can't predict. Tomorrow might bring more singing, might bring silence, might bring artillery, might bring something entirely unexpected. The war has taught you not to assume, not to predict, not to count on anything except uncertainty. But for tonight, there was singing. There was music. There was a moment when men on both sides acknowledged each other's existence, acknowledged the shared holiday, acknowledged something beyond the war, beyond the trenches, beyond the enmity that's supposed to define everything. Your thoughts drift, losing coherence, the boundary between waking and sleeping becoming uncertain. Images from the day mixing with memories from before, with hopes for after, with dreams that might not be dreams, with thoughts that might not be thoughts. The cold is distant now, present but not immediate. Your body has adjusted as much as it's going to. The numbness has reached its limit. The discomfort has plateaued. What remains is just the baseline of winter existence, the constant that defines every night. That makes sleep both necessary and difficult. But sleep is coming. You can feel it approaching, the heaviness in your limbs, the slowing of thoughts, the gradual shutdown of conscious processing, the body taking over, prioritizing rest, demanding the recovery that tomorrow will require. Tomorrow will bring what it brings. Christmas Day, the 25th of December, 1914, a day that should mean home and family and celebration. That will instead mean the trench and the cold and whatever the war decides to do. But also a day that might bring something unexpected, something unprecedented, something that the singing tonight has hinted at. You let go of trying to predict, let go of trying to understand, let go of trying to make sense of anything. Sleep doesn't require sense. Sleep doesn't require understanding. Sleep only requires surrender, only requires letting go, only requires accepting that you don't need to be in control, don't need to be vigilant, don't need to be anything except at rest. The darkness holds you. The earth surrounds you. The blankets cover you. Your breathing slows to match the breathing of the other men. The rhythm of sleep. The rhythm of rest. the rhythm that says the day is done and the night is for recovery and tomorrow will take care of itself. Somewhere above, the stars continue their ancient paths. Somewhere beyond the dugout, the trenches stretch away into darkness. Somewhere across no man's land, German soldiers are settling into their own dugouts, their own bunks, their own attempts at rest, and somewhere in the space between, in the frozen ground of no man's land, the silence holds, the peace holds, the strange quiet that descended after the singing, the pause that might be meaningful, that might be nothing, that might be everything. That time will reveal, but none of that matters now. Now there's only sleep, only rest, only the necessary shutdown that lets the body recover, that lets the mind process, that lets tomorrow become possible. Sleep that asks nothing, demands nothing, offers only darkness and rest and the temporary escape from cold and duty and war. Sleep comes, deep and complete, the kind of sleep that only exhaustion can bring, the kind of sleep that erases everything, that creates a space of pure rest, of pure nothing, of pure escape from the endless demands of survival. And in that sleep, there are no dreams, no visions, no processing, just darkness, just rest, just the body doing what bodies do when finally allowed, when finally given permission, when finally released from the constant vigilance that military life demands. The night passes, hours flowing by unmarked, unmeasured, mattering only in their accumulation, in the rest they provide, in the recovery they allow. The stars wheel, the frost deepens, the cold intensifies, but sleep continues, rest continues, the temporary escape continues until morning, until voices, until the excitement that will wake you to Christmas Day, to whatever impossible thing is about to happen, to the day that will be remembered, that will be told about, that will matter in ways you can't yet imagine. But that's tomorrow, that's later, that's not now. Now there's only this, only sleep, only rest, only darkness, only the deep peace of exhaustion, finally satisfied, only the gift of unconsciousness, only the blessing of dreams forgotten, only rest. Sounds arrive before awareness does, not sharply, just gradually. Voices existing without requiring immediate attention. The dugout dim, grey light present. The quality suggesting morning without demanding full wakefulness. The air cold. Your breath visible even here underground. The blankets rough against your face, heavy with the smell of wool and earth. Your body stiff from the narrow bunk, from the cold that penetrated even here, from hours of stillness. The voices continue outside, rising and falling, the tone still unusual, still carrying something beyond normal morning routine, but not urgent, not alarming, just different, just present. Then memory returns, Christmas morning, the singing last night, the strange quiet that settled over both lines, the possibility that today might be different, that something unexpected might happen. The other bunks are empty, blankets thrown back hastily. The men who are sleeping here are gone. Up and dressed and already outside, you can hear the voices more clearly now, coming from the trench itself. Multiple conversations happening simultaneously, overlapping, creating a buzz of activity. Not alarmed voices, though. That's the first thing you notice, not sharp commands that mean danger. Not the edge of panic that comes with surprise attacks. Something else. Something you can't quite identify from inside the dugout. Curiosity, maybe. Wonder. Excitement of a kind that's rare here. You swing your legs off the bunk, feet finding the cold earth floor. The chill is immediate, shocking, driving away the last remnants of sleep. Your boots are where you left them. Leather still stiff with cold despite having been inside all night. You pull them on, fingers clumsy with sleep and cold, working the laces through the eyelets, one at a time, creating the familiar crisscross pattern, pulling them tight, tying them off. The routine so familiar you could do it blindfolded. Probably, have done it half asleep more times than you can count. Your coat is wrapped around you already. You slept in it, like you sleep in everything except your boots, never knowing when you might need to be up and moving, when the call might come that requires immediate response, when staying in bed might mean death. You pull on your boots, the leather cold and stiff, laces, difficult with hands still sluggish from sleep, the routine mechanical, practiced, the same motions every morning, feet into boots, laces through eyelets, tighten and tie, your coat already wrapped around you from sleeping in it, the wool scratchy and familiar, your equipment still on, webbing and pouches, everything you need to survive, everything you carry. Outside, the morning is crisp and bright. The sky overhead is pale blue, cloudless, stretching to every horizon, without interruption, without blemish, just pure colour. The sun just clearing the horizon to the east. Low-angle light painting everything gold and rose and amber. The frost that formed overnight coats everything, transforming the trench into something almost beautiful. All the mud and damage softened by white crystals that catch the early light. That sparkle, that shimmer, that turn the ordinary into something magical. Your breath fogs the air, each exhalation visible. The cold is sharp, immediate, demanding attention. But it's not the cold that everyone's talking about. Men are gathered along the fire step, clustered in groups, looking over the parapet, pointing, discussing something with animation you haven't seen in weeks, in months. You make your way toward the nearest group, joining them, looking where they're looking, and what you see holds your attention. Men standing on the German parapet, openly visible. The scene unfamiliar but not threatening. No man's land lies before you. The same 300 yards. Shell holes and wire. The trench holds you still, transformed by daylight and frost. The hard edges softened. Violence made beautiful by ice. The distance is the same as always. 300 yards, maybe slightly less here, maybe slightly more in other places, but the same general distance that's defined your relationship with the German forces since arrival. Close enough to see movement, close enough to hear sounds when the wind is right, but too far for conversation, too far for interaction, too far for anything except violence. And beyond that familiar distance, at the German parapet, something extraordinary is happening. Something that shouldn't be possible. Something that violates every expectation, every assumption about how this war works. There are men standing on the parapet, not hidden behind it, not crouched for cover, but standing openly, fully visible, exposed, dozens of them, spread along the line as far as you can see in both directions. The sight is impossible to fully process. Your mind struggles with it, tries to fit it into familiar categories, but there are no categories for this, no framework, no prior experience to reference. This is entirely new, entirely unprecedented. Some are waving, arms raised in greeting, the universal human gesture of hello, of acknowledgement, of peaceful intent. Arms that yesterday held rifles are now raised empty, open palms showing no threat, just human hands waving across no man's land, in acknowledgement, in invitation. Some are holding up what look like small trees, decorated with candles and coloured paper. Christmas trees, actual Christmas trees brought up from somewhere, displayed proudly. Some are simply standing, hands in pockets, looking across at the British lines with expressions of curiosity, of expectation, of something that looks almost like hope, not threatening, not hostile, just human, just present, just there in the open air as if this were the most natural thing in the world. They started about half an hour ago, someone says beside you. Private Harrison, one of the men who was at the brazier last night, just climbed up and stood there. No one's shot at them. No one knows quite what to make of it. His voice carries wonder, confusion, the sound of someone trying to understand something unprecedented. As you watch, one of the Germans cups his hands around his mouth, shouts something. The distance makes the words unclear, but the tone is unmistakable, friendly, Inviting, he gestures with one arm, a sweeping motion that seems to indicate no man's land. That seems to be asking something, suggesting something. "Is that Fritz calling out?" asks someone else, using the universal British term for German soldiers. Fritz, Tommy, the names that make enemies into individuals, that humanize what military language tries to keep abstract. "I think he's saying Merry Christmas," Harrison replies, in English. His accent's thick, but I think that's what he's saying. The observation brings murmurs, comments, men processing this information, Germans speaking English, Germans wishing you Merry Christmas, Germans acting like humans instead of enemies. There's a pause while everyone processes this. The Germans speaking English, the Germans waving, the Germans standing in the open as if this were a Sunday afternoon in peacetime rather than the Western Front on Christmas morning in the middle of a war. Corporal Matthews appears, moving down the line, checking on this development, trying to assess the situation, trying to determine what his role should be in whatever is happening. He stops at your group, looks out at the German parapet, takes in the scene with practiced assessment, the assessment of a man responsible for other men's safety. "Any officers about?" he asks, looking around, trying to locate someone with authority to make decisions, someone with rank sufficient to take responsibility for whatever happens next. "Lieutenant Peterson went to headquarters about an hour ago," someone says. "Haven't seen him since." The absence of officers creates a vacuum, removes clear authority, forces men to make their own judgments, to act on their own initiative. Matthews nods slowly, considering the situation. The absence of clear orders creates a peculiar freedom, a space where individual choice becomes possible, where the usual chains of command loosen slightly, where men can act as men rather than as soldiers. "No firing," he says finally. That's still the order from last night. Maintain watch, but no firing unless fired upon. He pauses, looks at the German line again, then back at the men. "Anyone wants to wave back, I suppose that's their business." His tone is carefully neutral. Not quite permission, not quite prohibition, just acknowledgement that he won't stop anyone who chooses to respond. It's not quite permission, but it's not prohibition either. It's the careful military non-stance that allows things to happen without explicitly endorsing them. That maintains plausible deniability while opening possibilities. That lets men make choices while preserving the fiction of military discipline. Someone near the end of the group raises an arm, waves tentatively toward the German line. Testing. Seeing what happens? The gesture is immediately answered by several waves from the opposite side. Enthusiastic, encouraging, welcoming, creating a feedback loop of friendly gesture. More men are climbing onto the British parapet now, emboldened by the lack of response, by the obvious friendliness of the Germans, by the simple human desire to stand upright after months of crouching, after months of keeping your head down, after months of making yourself small. You find yourself climbing up too, boots finding purchase on the fire step, the wooden platform built into the front wall of the trench, hands gripping sandbags for balance, for security. The bags are rough under your palms, frozen solid, the burlap stiff with ice. And then you're standing in the open air, fully exposed for the first time in so long you can't remember when you last stood like this. The sensation is strange, vertiginous almost, disorienting. You feel vulnerable and liberated at the same time. Exposed and free. The German rifles are there. You can see them clearly in the morning light, leaning against their parapet, or held casually, but they're not being raised, not being aimed, not being pointed in your direction. The Germans are just standing, looking at you as you look at them, separated by 300 yards that suddenly seems much narrower than yesterday. "Frohe Weihnachten," one of them shouts, clear enough to understand, despite the distance, despite the accent. "Merry Christmas," the traditional greeting, the universal acknowledgement of the day, of what this day means, of what it's supposed to mean even here. "Merry Christmas," someone from your section shouts back. Then others are joining in, British and German voices calling greetings back and forth across no man's land. The absurdity of it mixing with something like joy, something like relief, something like recognition that underneath everything, you're all just men who'd rather not be here. You stand there taking it in, the frost sparkling on the ground, the clear blue sky, the men on both sides standing openly, waving, calling out. It doesn't feel real. 5 months of war, and now this. Men treating each other like neighbours across a fence, like friends meeting on a village green, like humans, instead of enemies. One of the Germans is climbing down from his parapet. He pauses at the wire, looks back as if checking with his companions, then starts working his way through a gap. A space in the wire that exists for patrols, for raids, for the movement that occasionally needs to happen. He's in no man's land now, walking slowly, carefully, hands visible and empty, held slightly away from his body, the universal gesture of peaceful intent, of being unarmed, of offering no threat. A second man follows him, then a third, then more, a small group forming. On the British side, someone makes a decision. Private Taylor, a farmer before the war, calm and unflappable, the kind of man who approaches everything with steady practicality. He climbs down, starts toward the wire. "Anyone else?" he asks, not quite looking back, not waiting for permission, just moving and trusting others will follow if they choose. There's a decision point, a moment of choice, a threshold that once crossed changes everything. Standing here, you're just a soldier. On this side of the wire, you're following orders, maintaining position, doing your duty, but stepping out there, into no man's land, toward the Germans. That's different. That's choosing something, choosing to participate, choosing to engage, choosing to see what happens when you treat enemies as humans. You surprise yourself by moving. One moment standing on the parapet considering, the next climbing down. Committed, the choice made almost before you're aware of making it. Following Taylor toward the gap in the wire, joining him in this impossible thing. Harrison is with you. So is Miller, the young private who mentioned his sister's prayers last night. So are others, a group of perhaps 6 or 7 forming without discussion, without plan. The ground is uneven, frozen hard, each footstep crunching through the frost crust, breaking through to the mud beneath, the sound loud in the still air, the ground uneven beneath your boots, the frost crunching, the rifle slung across your back, years of training present but quiet. But the Germans are walking too, moving slowly toward the centre, stopping about halfway between the lines, waiting there, making no threatening moves, just standing, just waiting, just existing in this impossible space that should be lethal but somehow isn't. The walk across no man's land feels surreal, each step taking you further from safety, further from the familiar walls of the trench, further into exposure, into vulnerability, into the space that should be deadly but somehow isn't. Not today, not this morning. Your boots crunch through frost, the sound loud in the still air, each footfall breaking through the ice crust, leaving impressions, creating a trail, marking your passage across ground that usually sees no passage, that usually knows only death. The meeting happens at a shell crater, one of dozens that pockmark this ground. This particular one, perhaps 4 feet deep, 6 feet across, the edges irregular, the bottom filled with frozen mud, a wound in the earth that has become a landmark, a meeting point, a place where enemies become acquaintances. One of the larger ones, its edges softened by time and frost, 6 British soldiers, 4 Germans. You stop a few feet apart, suddenly uncertain. This is territory beyond military training, beyond orders and regulations. This is human interaction in a place where human interaction isn't supposed to exist. This close, you can see their faces clearly. Young men, most of them, one older. perhaps in his 30s, with a thick moustache and lines around his eyes that suggest experience, wisdom. Perhaps children at home. They're dressed like you, in wool coats and heavy boots, their uniforms different in cut and colour, but similar in purpose. English, one of them says, the older one with the moustache. His accent is heavy but comprehensible. The question is simple, but the answer is complicated. English implies nation, identity, side, but also language, culture, a way of being that transcends military designation. Some of us, Taylor replies, Scottish, Irish, bit of everything really, the truth of empire, of an army drawn from across Britain and beyond. United by language and crown, if not by birthplace, not pure anything, just British in the complicated way that British has always meant. The German nods, understanding perhaps, or just acknowledging. I am Karl, he says. These are my friends. We are from Bavaria. The introduction is formal, proper, the kind of thing you'd do at any meeting, as if this were normal, as if meeting in no man's land on Christmas morning was something that happened every day. There's a moment of hesitation before the first handshake, a pause where everyone considers the strangeness, the impossibility, the fact that yesterday you were shooting at each other, that tomorrow you might be again, that today you're offering hands in greeting. But the moment passes. Karl extends his hand first, steady and sure, not hesitant, not tentative, just offered, waiting. You take it. The grip firm, the skin cold and rough, human skin, human warmth despite the cold, human contact that breaks through everything. That makes real what should be impossible. Introductions follow, names exchanged, more hands shaken, each handshake its own small miracle, its own assertion of humanity, its own choice to see the other as person rather than enemy. The physical contact is startling. These are the same hands that were holding rifles aimed in your direction yesterday, that pulled triggers, that threw grenades. Now they're gripping yours in peaceful greeting, peaceful friendship. The skin is cold, rough with work and weather, completely human. The handshake firm but not aggressive, the universal gesture of peaceful meeting, of greeting, of acknowledgement between equals, between men who recognize each other as men. You sing well, Harrison says, gesturing vaguely toward the German lines. Last night, the carols, his attempt at conversation, at bridging the language gap, at finding common ground in the shared experience of last night's singing. Karl smiles, the expression transforming his face from something stern to something warm, from soldier to human. We hear you also. Silent night, very beautiful. The compliment is genuine, offered without irony, without sarcasm, just appreciation for music, for human voice raised in song. The gift exchange begins organically, without plan, without coordination, just the natural human impulse to share, to give, to create reciprocity, to establish the bonds that exist between people rather than soldiers. One of the younger Germans is digging in his coat pocket, searching for something, his face concentrating, fingers fumbling slightly in the cold, in the layers of clothing, finding what he's looking for. He produces a small package wrapped in brown paper, offers it to Miller with a shy smile. Chocolate, he says in heavily accented English, from my mother. For Christmas. The gift is precious, rare, something saved for this day, this moment. Miller takes it, clearly moved, his young face showing emotion. He fumbles in his own pockets, comes up with a tin of tobacco. Here, British issue. It's not much, but the offering, the exchange, the creation of reciprocity, of balance, of mutual gift-giving that transcends the war. The exchange is accepted with gravity, with mutual appreciation. More items appear from pockets and haversacks, cigarettes traded for cigars, buttons exchanged as souvenirs, small tokens that will travel home in pockets. That will be shown to families. That will be proof that this happened. A harmonica produces from somewhere. A few notes played tentatively. Then a simple tune, something that could be from anywhere. That belongs to no particular nation. The music hangs in the cold air, beautiful and simple, human expression in its most basic form. Behind you, more men are emerging from both trenches. The trickle becomes a flow, becomes a flood. Dozens of soldiers converging on no man's land, drawn by curiosity, by the magnetic pull of this strange possibility, by the simple desire to be part of whatever is happening. The officers haven't stopped it yet. Maybe they won't. You talk with Carl and his companions for what might be 10 minutes or 30. Time unclear. The conversation flowing in stops and starts. Limited by language, limited by strangeness, but happening nonetheless. Carl speaks slowly, choosing words carefully. His English is good but requires thought, requires effort. He explains about Bavaria, about his town, about the school where he taught, about students he misses. His friend Heinrich worked in a factory before the war, making machine parts, precision work, work that required steady hands and careful attention, work he was good at, work he hopes to return to. The younger one, whose name you catch as Joseph, was studying medicine, had 2 years completed when mobilization came, plans to finish after the war, still believes the war will end, still believes in the future. The conversation continues, building momentum, finding its rhythm despite the language barriers, despite the strangeness, despite everything that should make this impossible. Communication happening through determination, through goodwill, through the simple desire to connect. They ask about you, about England, about what life is like there, about your home, your family, your work. The question's genuine, interested, not perfunctory, not polite obligation, but real curiosity about another life, another experience, another way of being in the world. You tell them what you can, choosing details that translate, that don't require complex explanation, that can be understood across language and culture, about your town, about your family, about the things you did before the war changed everything. Before life became this, you tell them what you can, about home, about work, about family, the conversation ordinary, the kind of conversation you might have with anyone, with neighbours, with acquaintances, with humans. The sun angle changes, shadows lengthen. The conversation is stilted, limited by language barriers and strangeness, limited by the sheer impossibility of what's happening, but it's conversation nonetheless. Human communication, connection across the divide. Carl talks about his life before, about the school where he taught, a small school in Bavaria, rural, serving farming communities, children arriving in the morning, some walking miles, coming from scattered farms, arriving with lunch pails, with books if they had them, with eagerness to learn. He taught everything, mathematics and reading, history and geography, science when he could, art when time allowed. The curriculum determined by the ministry, but adapted for reality, for children who needed to help with harvests, for families who couldn't always spare them for school. Carl was a teacher before the war, had been teaching for 7 years, long enough to see some of his first students finish, long enough to develop his methods, his approach, long enough to love the work, to feel called to it, to imagine doing it for the rest of his life. His friend Heinrich worked in a factory. The younger one, whose name you didn't catch, was studying to be a doctor. They have families, homes, lives that were interrupted by mobilization orders, by the machinery of nations at war, by decisions made by men in distant capitals who will never stand in frozen mud on Christmas morning. How long you think this will last? Carl asks at one point. His English careful, deliberate, each word chosen with thought. Unclear whether he means the truce or the war itself, whether he's asking about hours or years, whether he wants to know how long this moment can continue or how long until everyone can go home. Today maybe. Tomorrow, who knows? Taylor shrugs. The honest answer, the only possible answer, they told us it. would be over by Christmas when we enlisted. The bitter truth, the lie that brought men to the front, the promise that has been broken so completely, no one believes anymore. They tell us the same, Carl says quietly. There's a moment of shared understanding, the recognition that both sides were fed the same reassurances, the same promises of quick victory, the same assurances that this would be brief, glorious, that men would be home by Christmas, the Christmas that is now today, the Christmas that finds everyone still here, still fighting, still dying. The sun climbs higher, the pale winter sun starting its arc across the southern sky. The frost begins to melt where light hits directly, turning to water, to dampness. Those shadows remain frozen, still holding on to night's cold, still resisting the day's warmth, such as it is. More men keep coming, the space between trenches filling with clusters of soldiers, British and German mixing freely, communicating as best they can, through broken English, through German phrases picked up, through gestures, through the universal language of humanity that transcends words, sharing what little they have, cigarettes and chocolate, bread and tea, stories and photographs, creating bonds that shouldn't exist, that violate every rule, that exist outside the normal structure of war, that are purely human, purely personal, purely real. By mid-morning, no man's land has become something like a marketplace, not commercial, but social. A place where people gather and interact, where normal rules are suspended and something else takes their place, where the impossible becomes actual, where enemies become acquaintances, where acquaintances become something like friends. You've moved from the initial meeting point, wandering among the various groups that have formed. Some men are engaged in earnest conversation, working through language barriers with gestures and patience, drawing pictures in the frost, using hands to indicate meaning, creating communication through determination and goodwill. Others are simply standing together, smoking, enjoying the novelty of being upright in daylight without fear, without the constant awareness of snipers, without the need to keep low, just standing like men used to stand before trenches, before war, before all of this. Near the centre of no man's land, someone has discovered the body of a soldier. British from the uniform, from the insignia visible on what remains. Who must have fallen weeks ago during one of the attacks that happened before the lines stabilised, before the war settled into its current form. The corpse is frozen, preserved by the cold, still recognisable as human despite weeks of exposure, despite what weather and time have done. The face is turned away, mercifully, but the body is clearly that of a man, someone's son, someone's brother, someone's friend. A group has gathered around it, British and Germans together, discussing what should be done, what the right thing is, what honour demands, what decency requires, not in formal terms, not in military language, just in the simple human understanding that the dead deserve respect, that bodies deserve burial, that men deserve dignity, even in death. An officer has appeared, Lieutenant Peterson. Back from headquarters, he looks uncertain, like a man caught between contradictory imperatives, between what regulations say and what humanity demands. He approaches the group, listens to the discussion, the debate about whether anything can be done, whether anything should be done. Then he makes a decision. We should bury him, he says simply. It's the decent thing to do. The words are simple, obvious even, but saying them commits him, commits the men, makes official what everyone already knew needed to happen, gives permission for decency, for humanity, for doing what's right regardless of regulations. A German officer nods agreement, his uniform marking him as equivalent rank to Peterson. We have some also, he says, his English careful and precise, probably learned in school, probably refined through study. We can work together, yes, make proper graves. The suggestion, the collaboration, the joint effort that shouldn't be possible, but somehow is. The burial detail forms organically, men volunteering, stepping forward without being asked, British and German together, fetching entrenching tools from the trenches, the small folding spades designed for digging hasty cover, for creating foxholes, for tunnelling, now repurposed for a more ancient duty, marking out areas where the ground is soft enough to dig despite the frost, finding spots where the earth hasn't frozen solid all the way through, where effort can actually move soil, where graves can actually be made rather than just attempted. You join the work, partly because it needs doing, partly because physical labour is familiar. Grounding, something concrete in a situation that feels increasingly surreal, partly because it feels right, because this man died and deserves burial regardless of what side he fought for, regardless of who killed him, regardless of anything except his humanity. The work begins, men spread out, marking locations, deciding where graves should be. The ground is examined, tested with spades, some areas rejected as too frozen, too hard, the frost extending too deep, other areas selected, where the soil is slightly softer, where digging is possible, where graves can actually be made rather than just attempted. The decision's practical, unemotional. This spot will work, that spot won't. The digging is hard work, physical, demanding, the kind of labour that makes muscles ache, that makes hands blister, that requires breaks, rotation, sharing the burden. The frost extends down several inches, creating a hard cap over the soil. Each shovel thrust meets resistance, the blade bouncing back sometimes, progress measured in small increments, half an inch, 2 inches. Sweat forms despite the cold, the exertion generating heat, breath coming harder, visible in the cold air, each exhalation a cloud, each inhalation drawing icy air deep into lungs, creating a crust that requires real effort to break through, requiring force, requiring persistence. Below that, the soil is heavy with moisture, winter dampness that makes it cling to the shovels. That resists removal. That makes every spadeful heavy. The work develops its own rhythm, its own pattern. Men taking turns with the shovels, working until tired, then handing off, then resting, then returning. The rotation natural, unspoken. Just the practical organisation that happens when people work together toward common purpose. You work in shifts, British and German taking turns at the same holes, the cooperation complete, seamless, no distinction made, no sides taken. Just men digging graves, just humans burying their dead, just the work that needs doing regardless of uniforms, or flags or the things that divide. The conversation during breaks is limited. Language barriers make extended discussion difficult, but gestures suffice, nods and hand signals, the universal language of shared labour, of common effort, of working together. The cooperation unstated but absolute, no discussion needed, just men working together toward a common goal, just humans doing what needs to be done, just the practical mechanics of burial. Someone finds identification on the British soldier. His name was Private James Fletcher, from Manchester, 22 years old. The details are written down carefully, ensuring the information won't be lost, that his family will know, that someone will be able to tell them he was buried, that he was treated with respect, that even in this place he was treated with respect. His body is lifted with care. 4 men working together, British and German hands supporting the weight, lowering him into the shallow grave, positioning him as respectfully as circumstances allow, trying to give dignity to death, trying to honour what remains. The graves are finished, 4 of them, 3 German, 1 British, the mounds of earth beside them, the stones gathered for marking, the work done, the dead ready for their rest. Men gather, British and German together, standing around the graves, caps removed, heads bowed, the universal posture of respect for the dead, the universal acknowledgement that this matters, that these men matter, that their deaths demand recognition. Lieutenant Peterson says a few words. He's not a chaplain, not trained for this, just an officer trying to do right by a dead soldier, trying to provide some dignity, some ceremony, some recognition that this man's life meant something. Nothing formal, nothing from a prayer book, just simple observations about duty and sacrifice, about Fletcher being far from home, about the hope that he might rest in peace, about the wish that this war might end soon, that no more men might die so far from home. The Germans stand with caps removed, heads bowed, listening even though most probably don't understand all the words, but understanding the sentiment, understanding the respect, understanding what this moment means. The respect transcends language, transcends nationality, transcends all the things that divide. The earth is returned to the grave, covering Fletcher, concealing him from view, protecting him from the elements, from scavengers, from further indignity. Someone finds stones, arranges them to mark the spot, creating a simple cairn, a marker that will last at least for a while. Someone else produces a pencil and paper, writes out a rough marker with Fletcher's name and regiment. The makeshift gravestone. Inadequate, but better than nothing. Better than being forgotten, better than disappearing without trace. It's improvised, temporary, insufficient. But it's more than he had an hour ago, more than he had last night. It's acknowledgement, it's respect, it's the best that can be done under the circumstances. And sometimes the best that can be done is enough. The work continues across no man's land, multiple burial details operating simultaneously, British burying British, Germans burying Germans, but also British helping Germans, Germans helping British. The divisions that matter in war mattering less here. In this task, in this act of basic human decency, the German dead receive the same treatment. 3 bodies found in various locations, each recovery its own small operation, each requiring care, requiring respect, requiring the acknowledgement that these were men, are men still, deserving of dignity even in death, especially in death, each given a grave, each buried with the same care, each marked as well as possible, each afforded the dignity that war had denied them, the dignity that men deserve simply for being men. The work takes hours, requires real effort, makes you sweat despite the cold, makes muscles ache, makes hands blister where the wooden handles rub. But no one complains, no one suggests stopping. This is important work, perhaps the most important work, perhaps more important than anything else that's happened in this war. While the burials continue, other activities develop quietly. Someone has produced a football. Where it came from is anyone's guess, probably carried from Britain by someone optimistic enough to imagine time for games, someone young enough to pack a football alongside ammunition, someone who hadn't quite given up on the idea that war might have room for play. It's kicked around experimentally at first, passed between British and German feet with tentative touches, testing the possibility, seeing what happens, the universal language of sport requiring no translation, no shared vocabulary beyond the ball and the feet and the simple desire to play. A few men gather to watch, then a few more. Then clusters form. The ball moves back and forth in the open space. Not purposefully at first, just movement, just the pleasure of kicking something, of running, of being active in a way that isn't military, that isn't about survival, that's just about being human. Goals are discussed, negotiated, marked with whatever's available. Coats and caps, rifles stacked carefully, the German equipment different from British but serving the same purpose. Creating boundaries, defining the field, making the space into something recognisable as a pitch. Teams form through proximity and chance. No one organising formally. No captains chosen. No positions assigned. Just men dividing themselves roughly evenly, ending up on one side or the other based on where they're standing when the ball is ready to begin. What develops is less a game than a gentle exchange, a conversation through movement, a way of being together that requires no language, that transcends nationality, that exists in the universal understanding of how football works, informal, barely organised. More a matter of kicking the ball back and forth than any structured competition. No clear goals, no teams exactly, just men and a ball in the open space. Goals are designated with abandoned equipment, packs and helmets marking the boundaries, creating structure enough to call it a game, though it barely qualifies. It's too loose, too friendly, too lacking in the competitive edge that usually defines sport. Teams form and reform based on who's nearby rather than nationality. British and German mixed together, playing with each other rather than against, passing to whoever's open regardless of what uniform they're wearing, creating something entirely new. A game without sides, without enemies, without winners or losers. The ball continues moving, sometimes smoothly, sometimes erratically, bouncing on the frozen ground, taking unexpected directions, men adjusting, following, maintaining the loose structure that passes for a game. You watch for a while from the edge, standing with others who are content to observe, who are present without participating, who contribute by witnessing, by being part of the gathering, even if not part of the game itself. More men gather around the edges, spectators drawn by curiosity, by the novelty, by the simple pleasure of watching others play, of seeing something normal, something that belongs to peace rather than war, something that reminds everyone of home, of village greens, of Sunday afternoons. The watching is its own form of participation, your presence adding to the event, creating an audience, providing witnesses, making this moment more than just a few men kicking a ball, making it into an event, into something that will be remembered, into something that matters, your presence adding to the mass of men, adding to the sense that this is happening, that this is real, that this moment exists. The ball moves across the frost-crusted ground. Men follow it with easy strides, not running exactly, just moving at a pace that's faster than walking, but slower than urgency. The pace of play rather than competition, the pace of enjoyment rather than intensity. The ball is leather, old and worn, probably seen use before the war, carried through training, through travel, through all the movement that brought its owner here, now repurposed for this impossible morning, for this game that shouldn't exist. Someone passes to you and you find yourself in it. Receiving the ball, taking a few touches, feeling the leather under your boot. The familiar sensation from before the war, from village greens and Sunday afternoons, from a time when football was just football, when life was simpler, when war was something that happened to other people, in other places. The motion is familiar, despite months of disuse. The body remembers, the feet remember. The sense of timing and touch that comes from childhood play, from hours spent kicking a ball against a wall, from games that lasted until dark, from a time when this was normal, when this was what you did. You pass it on, the ball moving to someone else, the moment passing, the game continuing without you needing to be central to it, without needing to be anything except present, except part of it, except one more man kicking a ball on a frozen morning in Belgium. The ball doesn't last long. Someone boots it too hard. It lands in wire, deflates gradually, the movement slowing without stopping completely. Men continuing to stand together, the gathering continuing, but while it lasted it was something, a moment of pure play in a place where play had seemed impossible. A reminder that men are not just soldiers, that humans need more than survival. That joy is possible even here, even now, even under these circumstances. Men laugh about it afterward, the deflated ball becoming a joke, a story, a symbol of the day's strangeness. Its brief flight, a metaphor for something larger that no one quite knows how to articulate, Something about the fragility of peace, about the temporary nature of this moment, about how easily things deflate. You don't need to remember who said what. The voices blend together now, laughter and words mixing into general sound. Time unclear again, the sun holding its position, nothing advancing, just men standing in open space. The frost has melted where feet have been, where bodies have stood, leaving darker patches of exposed ground. The wire casts long shadows across no man's land, stretching toward the trenches, moving as the sun moves, slowly, imperceptibly. Someone lights a cigarette. The smoke drifts upward, dissipating. Someone else sits on the edge of a shell crater, just sitting, looking at nothing in particular. The general sense of pause, of time suspended, of nothing requiring action. You return to the edge, to watching rather than participating, content to observe as others continue moving together across the frozen ground, content to be present without being central, content to let this moment be what it is without trying to force it into something else. The sun reaches its zenith, such as it is in December, the low arc that passes for midday in winter, the light thin and pale but welcome nonetheless, creating long shadows, painting everything in tones of gold and blue, making the battlefield beautiful in a way that feels almost obscene. The temperature hasn't risen much, but the activity keeps everyone warm, the constant movement generating heat that the still air can't steal immediately. Breath still fogs but less densely. Hands are still cold but functional. The body's core temperature maintained through activity. You've been in no man's land for hours now. The initial strangeness has worn off, replaced by a kind of comfortable familiarity, as if this were the normal state and the war were the aberration, as if men standing together and talking were natural and trenches were strange. Hunger makes itself known. Not urgent, not desperate, just present, the reminder that bodies need fuel, that men need to eat, that hours have passed since breakfast. Food appears from somewhere, from pockets and haversacks, from the supplies men carry, from the rations distributed this morning, from packages sent from home, from the various sources that keep soldiers fed. The Germans produce bread, real bread, not the hard biscuits that pass for bread in British rations, but actual loaves. Dark rye bread, dense and filling, the kind of bread that requires chewing, that has substance, that provides real nourishment. They break the loaves, tearing them into pieces, passing the pieces around, the sharing unstudied, natural, the way people share food when there's enough to go around, when generosity costs nothing. The Germans have better provisions, packages from home, proper bread instead of hard biscuits, dark rye bread that's dense and filling. They share generously, breaking loaves and passing pieces around, creating community through the most basic act of sharing food. In return, the British offer tea, brewed in mess tins over small fires lit in shell holes, using water from canteens, using precious fuel, sweetened with condensed milk that's thick and too sweet but perfect in its way. The universal British offering, the drink that means hospitality, that means welcome. The groups that form are organic, natural, based on proximity and chance, and the subtle social dynamics that govern human interaction even here. Even in these circumstances, even in no man's land on Christmas Day 1914, you sit with a mixed group, British and German together, perhaps 8 or 9 men total, the exact number unclear as people move, as some drift away and others join, as the composition shifts fluidly, as the boundaries remain permeable. The circle is rough, informal, men sitting on whatever's available, on the frozen ground, on equipment, on the edge of shell craters, whatever provides a seat, whatever makes the conversation possible. Drinking tea and eating bread, the conversation flowing in a mixture of languages and gestures, words supplemented by pointing, by drawing in. Frost, by the universal language of hands and expressions. Karl is there, the Bavarian teacher, explaining something about his town with expansive hand movements, creating a picture with gestures, his hands tracing streets and buildings, creating geography in air, making his home visible through description and enthusiasm. Harrison is attempting to teach a young German the words to a music hall song, with limited success but great enthusiasm. The German tries, stumbling over the pronunciation, laughing at his own mistakes. Harrison laughs too, the sound genuine, unforced, the sound of actual friendship forming despite everything. Pockets are searched, wallets produced, the small leather folders that hold precious items, that protect photographs from weather, from damage, from the rough conditions of military life. Each man carries something, some memento, some connection to home. Private Miller is showing photographs, pulling them carefully from his breast pocket, where he keeps them close, where he can reach them easily, where they're protected by layers of uniform, by the bulk of his body, by position close to his heart, his family back home, his sister who's engaged, the house where he grew up, his mother and father standing in front of a brick building, his sister with her fiancé, all the people who make up his world beyond this place. The Germans produce their own photographs, passing them around carefully, protecting them from the dampness, from the rough handling that could damage them, explaining who everyone is, pointing out details, sharing their lives through these small rectangles of paper. The photographs pass from hand to hand, handled carefully, respectfully, each one a window into another life, into another world, into the homes and families that exist somewhere beyond this frozen field. The images are remarkably similar despite coming from different countries, despite different languages, despite the borders and nationalities and all the things that are supposed to make you different. The photographs show the same universal truths. Families, love, home, the things that matter beneath all the surface differences. Families gathered in front yards, children pose stiffly for the camera. Homes that look warm and solid and far away in distance, far away in time, far away in every way that matters. "My wife," says one of the Germans, a man named Joseph, pointing to a woman in a photograph, young and pretty and smiling at the camera. "She is worried. I write, tell her I am safe. But she worries." The universal experience, the women left behind, the families waiting, the constant fear that every day might bring bad news. "They all worry," Taylor says quietly. "My mother hasn't slept properly since I enlisted." Also, she says in her letters, keeps imagining the worst, the shared experience, the common ground, the recognition that everyone's mother worries, everyone's wife fears, everyone's family suffers. There's a pause weighted with shared understanding, the women waiting at home, carrying the burden of fear, living with uncertainty, writing letters that try to maintain normalcy while knowing everything is uncertain, while knowing that any day might bring the telegram no one wants to receive. "After the war," Joseph says carefully, "I will go home, work in my father's shop again, make shoes, simple work, honest work, the dream, the hope, the future that everyone clings to, the belief that there will be an after, that this will end, that normal life will resume." After the war, Harrison echoes, the phrase taking on the weight of prayer, of hope, of something between wish and belief. After the war, as if saying it makes it more real, as if naming the future can bring it closer, as if words have power over events. Time becomes less structured as the day progresses, less defined by specific events, less marked by clear boundaries. Just the general sense of hours passing, of the sun moving across the sky, of shadows lengthening, of light changing quality. Men sit in small groups, or stand or walk slowly across the frozen ground. No hurry, no urgency, just being present, just existing in this unusual space, this temporary suspension of normal military reality. The conversation flows despite limitations, despite barriers, despite everything that should make it impossible. Words pass back and forth, English, German, broken phrases in both, gestures filling gaps, expressions conveying what words cannot. The universal language of humans trying to communicate, trying to connect, trying to understand each other. Time becomes elastic during these exchanges, minutes feeling like hours passing like minutes, the usual markers absent, just the sense of being present, of participating, of existing in this moment that shouldn't exist but does. The afternoon wears on, neither quickly nor slowly, just proceeding at its own pace, the day unfolding according to its own logic, its own timeline, its own rhythm that has nothing to do with military schedules or watch rotations or the usual structures that define time here. The activity in no man's land continues, though it's becoming more subdued now. The initial excitement giving way to a quieter kind of companionship. Men are sitting more than standing, talking more than moving. The conversations becoming deeper, more personal, more real. Details blur. Who spoke to whom? What was said exactly? The specifics don't require tracking. Just the general sense of time passing, of men being present together, of the day continuing at its own pace. The tea cools in tin cups, half drunk. Forgotten? Food has meaning beyond nutrition here. Sharing food creates bonds, creates obligation, creates relationship. The Germans sharing their bread, the British sharing their tea, each gift carrying weight, each exchange meaning something. The bread eaten or not eaten, some men hungry, some not, some saving portions for later, for when hunger returns. The chocolate, shared or pocketed, some distributed immediately, some saved, some sent home in letters as proof of this day, none of it mattering particularly, just the being here, the standing together, the continuing presence. Shadows lengthen across the frozen ground, the light changing quality, becoming more golden, more amber, the afternoon aging into evening, the day moving toward its end without urgency, without announcement. Just the gradual shift. You find yourself telling Carl about home, about your work before the war, about the things you miss, the small ordinary things, hot baths, fresh bread, your own bed, books, Sunday mornings, all the things that made up normal life. The things you took for granted, the things you'll never take for granted again. He listens attentively, asking questions, making observations, showing genuine interest. In return, he talks about his students, about the school where he taught, about his hopes for returning to that life, about wanting to see his students grow up, about wanting to be part of that growth. You know, Carl says at one point, in different time, different place, we could be friends. Go to pub, drink beer, talk about normal things. Now, he trails off, gesturing at the surrounding landscape, at the trenches on either side, at the reality of where you are and why, at the impossibility of maintaining this beyond today. Maybe we are friends, you say, just for today. Maybe that's enough. The words surprise you, but they feel true. Whatever this is, it's real. It matters. It's worth something even if it can't last. Even if tomorrow everything returns to normal. Even if this is just one day. Carl considers this, then nods slowly. Yes, for today we are friends. Tomorrow, he shrugs, acknowledging uncertainty, the impossibility of knowing what tomorrow will bring, the likelihood that orders will come, that this will end, that the war will resume. But for today, this is real. The light is beginning to change. The pale winter sun starting its descent toward the western horizon. The angle becoming more acute, the shadows lengthening. The cold is returning with it. The brief warmth of midday fading, replaced by the familiar chill. The frost that never quite melted in the shadows is beginning to spread again. Reclaiming territory, coating surfaces that had briefly been clear. the temperature dropping degree by degree, reminding everyone that this is December, that this is winter. That night is coming, and night is always colder. Officers are appearing more frequently now, British and German both, moving among the groups, speaking quietly to their men. The message is the same from both sides. Time to return. The day is ending. The truce must end with it. Orders have come. Structure must be maintained. The war must resume. There's resistance to this, subtle but real. Men reluctant to leave, to return to the trenches, to resume the posture of enemies, to put back on the masks of soldiers, to return to the world where these men are targets rather than friends. But orders are orders. The habit of obedience is strong, trained into everyone, reinforced by months of military discipline, by the understanding that disobedience has consequences, that the military machine doesn't tolerate disruption. That individual will must bend to collective necessity. Gradually, reluctantly, the groups begin to break up. Men shake hands, make promises to remember this day, exchange final small gifts or tokens, buttons and badges, cigarettes and chocolate, photographs even, small physical objects that prove this happened, that carry memory in tangible form. The moment of parting carries weight, more weight than it should perhaps. You've known this man for hours, not days or weeks or years, just hours. But those hours mattered. Those hours created something real, something that will persist. You shake Carl's hand one last time, the grip firm, lasting longer than the previous handshakes, both of you reluctant to let go, both knowing this might be the last time. That tomorrow everything changes, that the war resumes, and with it the impossibility of this kind of contact. The grip is firm, meaningful, the handshake of friends parting, not of enemies pausing, not of soldiers on opposite sides, but of humans who recognize each other as such, who've shared something rare and precious. Good luck, you tell him, meaning it completely, hoping he survives whatever comes next, hoping he makes it home, hoping he returns to his school and his students, hoping the future he described becomes real, hoping he lives to be old. And to you, he replies, may we both see home again. The wish is mutual, sincere, the hope that both of you survive, that both of you return to the lives you had before, that both of you get to experience the after that everyone talks about. The parting takes time, longer than it should perhaps, men reluctant to leave, to end this, to return to the structures that keep them separate. But the sun is lower, the shadows longer, the day aging toward evening. Final handshakes, final words, final looks, trying to memorize faces, to hold on to this, to carry it forward into whatever comes next. Then you're walking back toward the British line, each step a return, to duty, to position, to the role of soldier rather than human, to the structures that maintain the war, following the others, leaving no man's land behind. The German soldiers are doing the same, retreating to their own positions, the space between the trenches emptying as the sun sinks lower, as the day draws to its inevitable close. The walk back is quiet, men moving in loose groups, not formations, not military order, just clusters of humans returning to their positions. The mood subdued, thoughtful, the day settling into memory even as it's still happening. Some men glance back, looking at no man's land again, at the space that was briefly something else, at the ground that held them all, at the place where something impossible occurred. Others look ahead, toward the British trenches, toward the familiar walls and duckboards, toward the routines that define existence here, toward what comes next. The trench feels different when you climb back into it, smaller somehow, more confining. After the openness of no man's land, after hours of standing upright, the walls feel like barriers, like limitations, like a return to prison after a day of freedom. You stand on the duckboards adjusting, readjusting to being back below ground level, back in the usual constraints of trench life. The others are experiencing the same disorientation. You can see it in their movements, the way they keep looking over the parapet, as if expecting to see the men they were just talking with. But the German parapet is empty now, or nearly so, just the occasional head visible, keeping watch, maintaining the minimal military presence that the situation requires. The decorations are gone, the trees removed, everything returned to its military configuration. The brief transformation reversed. Corporal Matthews is organising the evening routine with his usual efficiency. Watch schedules need maintaining. The braziers need tending. Tea needs making. Life in the trenches continues regardless of what happened during the day, regardless of how strange and unprecedented it all was. But there's a difference in how men approach these tasks. A gentleness, perhaps, or thoughtfulness. The conversations are quieter, more reflective, more internal. Someone starts to make a joke, the kind of crude humour that's standard in the trenches, then stops, the joke suddenly seeming inappropriate, out of place, after the day's events. Time loses structure for a while. Tasks happen, tea gets made, equipment gets checked, but the sequence doesn't matter. The order fades. Just the general continuation of routine without sharp edges. The brazier burns, coals glowing orange in the gathering dusk. Men move past it, warming hands, moving on. The same motion repeated, different men, same gestures, the pattern continuing. Somewhere, a cup clinks against metal. Somewhere boots scrape on duckboards. Somewhere, someone coughs. All the small sounds that make up evening. That define the transition from day to night. That happen, whether attended to or not. The evening settles in with familiar patterns, the routine reasserting itself, watch schedules maintained, duties performed, the structure of military life resuming. But changed somehow, altered by the day's events, by what happened, by what everyone experienced. You take your turn at watch, standing in your usual spot, the same position you've occupied for months, the same view you've stared at countless times, the same 300 yards stretching before you, but different now, changed by what happened there today, by the men who stood there, by the conversations that happened, by the humanity that was shared. Looking out over the darkening ground, the sun has set now, the sky fading, through shades of orange and pink to deep blue. The stars are beginning to appear again, the same stars that were there last night, indifferent to human affairs, following their ancient patterns. The cold returns as daylight fades. That familiar December cold, frost forms again on metal surfaces, on sandbags, on exposed timber, the temperature dropping as the sun descends. Observation without complaint. No one fires. The unofficial understanding from the morning seems to hold through the evening, an extension of the truce, or perhaps just a reluctance to be the first to break it. The German line is equally quiet. No shots, no artillery. Just the shared silence of two armies choosing, for this moment at least, not to fight. Private Miller approaches, taking up position beside you for a few minutes. He doesn't speak immediately, just stands and looks out, his young face thoughtful in the dimness, processing what he experienced, trying to make sense of it, trying to hold on to it. Strange day, he says finally. The understatement is almost funny. Strange doesn't begin to cover it. Extraordinary, unprecedented, impossible, but strange works. Strange captures the feeling without overstating it, without trying to force meaning onto something that resists easy interpretation. Yes, your response is simple, agreement, shared acknowledgement, no need for more words. The day speaks for itself. Do you think it'll happen again tomorrow? Miller's voice carries hope, the desire for this to continue, for the truce to extend, for one more day of peace, for Christmas to last longer, for the war to stay paused just a little while longer. You consider this. The honest answer is that you don't know. Today happened because of a unique confluence of factors. Christmas Eve singing, Christmas morning, spontaneous movement, absence of clear prohibition, all of it adding up to possibility. Tomorrow is Boxing Day, no longer quite as special. The circumstances different. I don't know, you say honestly. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see what morning brings. The only answer possible, the only truth you can offer. Tomorrow will be what it will be. The war makes its own decisions. Men can only respond. Miller nods. Accepting this, he's quiet for another moment, then says softly, I hope it does. Happen again, I mean. I know it can't last, but just another day would be something. The honesty of youth, the willingness to express hope, the refusal to be cynical, the belief that wishing for something matters. He moves on. You're alone again with your thoughts, with the cold, with the slow passage of evening into night. Processing what happened takes time. The mind needs space to integrate experience, especially experience this unusual, this unprecedented, this far outside normal parameters. The events need to be sorted, categorized, fit into some framework that makes sense. The memory of the day sits with you, present and demanding attention, vivid and strange, refusing to fade, refusing to blur, each detail sharp, each moment clear, the frost on the ground, the men on the parapets, the handshakes, the conversations, all of it preserved with unusual clarity, real despite feeling dreamlike. Karl's handshake, the taste of German bread, the sound of laughter in no man's land, the deflated football, the graves marked with stones. Tomorrow or the day after, the war will resume. Orders will come through. Artillery will fire. The machine of war will reassert itself. But for today, for this one day, it was different. Men chose differently. Men acted as humans rather than soldiers. Men created peace where peace wasn't supposed to exist. The watch continues. Time passes. Eventually, your relief arrives. You can return to the dugout, to the narrow bunk and scratchy blankets, to the brief escape that sleep provides. Tomorrow will bring what it brings. But tonight, you have the memory of today. And that's something. That matters. That can't be taken away. You sleep that night with the memory of handshakes, with the taste of shared bread, with the sound of voices mixing, with the image of men standing together. And when morning comes, whether the truce continues or ends, whether the war resumes or pauses, whether men return to no man's land or stay in their trenches, nothing can change what happened today. Nothing can erase the memory. Nothing can take away the knowledge that for one day, for one impossible, extraordinary, beautiful day, the war stopped and men were just men. The moment passes, the night continues beyond it. The telling continues whether you follow it or not. The men who lived it have long since gone to their rest, British and German alike, their bones mingling in the soil of Flanders, their differences erased by time and earth, united in death as they were briefly united in life, on one extraordinary Christmas morning. The dugout remains, dark, still, underground. Breathing continues without thought, stars wheeling overhead, unseen but present, frost thickening on metal surfaces, ice forming in puddles, the trench holding its position, men sleeping in other dugouts, breathing in darkness, watch being stood somewhere along the line, the night proceeding at its own pace, nothing requiring attention, just breath, in and out, and the rest happening without you. Good night.